This is coffee number 5. I'm your host, Lara Schmoisman. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to coffee number 5. Today, I was thinking about partnerships and how to partner with brands, because it's not, we talk so many times, you guys, and we talk about brand awareness, and we talk about how make our brand not only being seen, also at the end of the day, what we want is to make sales. But we know that marketing is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And we need to go step by step. And there's so many innovative ways to do marketing out there. And today I want to bring to you a pioneer of innovation in marketing. Welcome, David de Nino. How are you? David de Nino. Why? I always manage to every last name. I don't know how I do that. It's a talent.
That's okay. I get that mistake like frequently at restaurants or things like this, and I just let it go. I was like, sure, you can think I'm a De Niro. No, it's De Nino. But Lara, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And well, I'm so excited you're here. So, David, let's talk a little bit about your trajectory. Where you come from and what's your story? Because I know it. I want everyone to know who you are and why I invited you here.
Okay. I guess let's start with the most recent experience, which is probably the most relevant and interesting one to your audience, because your audience is presumably, a lot of them are in beauty. That's how you and I know each other. So I was a founding partner of the Allure store, which was a perma pop, as we called it, that was open in Soho in New York City. For 18 months, from July 2021 until January of this year, which is 2023. So,
but this model was super unique. And I'm glad that you bring this, because this was kind of reverse how a lot of companies were doing marketing.
Yeah. So the idea really was birthed from an editorial perspective, right? So this was an editorial extension from Allure, of course, the magazine. It's no longer print, but it is still, of course, one of the most prominent legacy titles out there. It's a title under, of course, the Condé Nast portfolio. And as we all know, print revenues, whether it's Vogue or Allure or traditional other print houses, print revenues have dried up. So for many, many years now, at least 5, 6, 7, 8 years, media outlets, the traditional ones that historically relied on print advertisements, have looked to diversify their product offering to advertisers. And in our case, this was an IRL retail-esque experience. But what's important to remember is that it is a marketing exercise. It wasn't sales. So it's not that these editorial outlets purport to be retail operators or retail innovators even. It's not that there's going to be a Wired store, although there is one in Newark Liberty Airport. It's not that there's going to be a GQ cafe and their margins are going to be all about selling espressos, although there also are GQ cafes, a handful of them scattered throughout the world. The idea is, how do we take editorial outlets who might have declining print readership, but still have a very strong brand and audience through other channels, namely digital, social, and how do we implant that? How do we interpret that IRL? Many media outlets have already been doing this, as I said, for 6+ years through one-off events. One of the earliest in this space was, you might remember, Refinery 29 doing 29 rooms. So it's Refinery bringing their editorial vision and what their audience and readership expects and loves about them, and selling that back to brand advertisers who normally would buy ad space on the site and say, partner with us on this experience, right? So at the core of it is experiential marketing, which again is not new. It's been around. It's been in ascendancy for 2+ decades. So can media outlets do experiential, sell it to brands as a new format but that comes along with the editorial authority, credibility, and existing baked-in audience that these outlets have. And now, of course, go ahead.
Let's explain to the public, because not everyone had the experience to go to the Allure store. What was experience for the brand going there? Because this first of all had a price tag. It wasn't.
Yes. Yeah. So
it wasn't for every brand.
That's right. And it's important to understand that to a layperson, to your average beauty consumer, they walk by the store, they walk in, it looks like a beauty store. You can go in, you can try products on, you can purchase products in a basket, which is left at the door. You swipe a credit card, you leave with products. And so it did have a base level retail-ish experience. This is very important. But the value proposition for brands had nothing to do with sales.
And it doesn't mean that at the end of the day or at the day of the experience, they're going to make the return of investment.
No, they're not even coming close, to be honest with you. They're not coming close. So it's positioned to brands. First, of course, it is as you mentioned, it's a pay-to-play exercise. So it wasn't a traditional retail setting where, hey, we're going to cut a brand a purchase order. We're going to be a wholesaler of record. We'll buy products. We'll store them downstairs in inventory, and we'll see what we can sell. No, it wasn't that at all. We didn't cut any purchase orders. Brands provided products on consignment, which means they send in a few dozen or a few hundred at most units. We store them downstairs. We are indeed the merchant of record. We pay retail sales tax on them. We have a reseller's license in New York City. But the thrust of the exercise and the value is people, consumers, coming into the Allure store and discovering and approximating themselves with brands and brand stories. Now, for brands, it's also an opportunity to align themselves with Allure, the name, the authority, the credibility, the recognition.
And this is something that the brands do all the time as a PR exercise, trying to get themselves featured in a magazine that, as you just explained earlier, it's losing distribution.
That's right. And it's also still very costly.
Yes.
Right. And so if your publicist or someone in-house at a brand were to pick up the phone and say, hey, I want to buy media from Condé Nast, from Hearst, from Penske, whomever, it's very unlikely you get an entry point in the thousands of dollars, meaning 3,000 or 5,000 or 7,000. These media packages are nowadays mostly going to be 10, 15, 25, 50K, depending on, of course, the audience and the reach in the ad unit that you're buying, the media package that you're buying. But our proposition was deliberately more economical, which meant it opened up the prospective brand partners to a much wider audience. The people that can invest in a glossy magazine, whether it's print or now online, is a lot smaller. And that's why when you go to these big media outlets online or on social, you do, if you pay close attention, kind of see a lot of repeat characters.
Also because a lot of the structure in the PR world have changed. The game changed, and now they're charging for presence. The pay-per-play became like really important player right now. It's just not only about getting featured in a magazine. You have the opportunity to be as seen on a magazine if you pay for it.
Yeah. Look, and I think that brands and good publicists, which I think nowadays are more essential than ever, right? There's, of course, always believers and cheerleaders and in PR, traditional PR I'm talking about, agency-driven PR, publicist-driven PR. And then there's naysayers. There's people that either have spent a lot of money in the past and gotten limited results. Anyhow, we always were, and I still remain to this day, a believer, and I think it's more essential than ever because you want to have, if you've got a holistic PR approach, you do want to have organic coverage as much as you want paid coverage. So there's got to be advertorials sprinkled in there. There has to be paid media packages in there. And you still want someone who can bring relationships to the table and score these mentions organically that take a lot of time and that take relationships behind them usually to get them. So I think it takes both to succeed. And I know when brands joined the Allure store, although it absolutely was not included editorial covers. Like we never,
That was my next question.
we never ever included it because, frankly, there is a wall there. There is a separation between edit and media and sales. And so a brand coming in there throwing money at the wall, whatever the sum would be, doesn't mean, and we never implied it. In fact, we went to great lengths to imply the opposite. There was not a direct connection. If you do this, editors will notice and you have a better chance of ABC, because we had to be clear on that. Are the editors in the room often? Yes. Do they pay attention to the programming that happens in the store? They absolutely do. So it's an effective way to get in front of them, but we discerned very clearly this is a marketing exercise where you can align yourself with an editorial outlet. You can be in the room with other active brands. And here was the big value prop, and it's the one that really was our thesis. Beauty brands, all CPG brands, but beauty brands in particular, I feel, because they are so tactile and it is such a saturated market, community is a huge thing. I know that term is thrown around now by everybody. Every marketer has to talk about community, and CMOs have to report on it. And what are you doing to build it? And what's the strategy, etc.
I have to tell you, at least every year I start with a keyword. And this year for me the keyword was community. And I was like, now I really don't want to use it anymore, because I've seen that the last year, everyone is overusing it.
Yeah, they are. But I mean, look, and that probably also indicates something of substance, that community engenders loyalty, right? Of course, even before it engenders loyalty, it engenders a familiarity with a brand's products, a brand's identity, a brand's ethos, a brand's personality. Who are this brand's friends? What are these brand's values? And these things matter when someone has, consumer, an opportunity to buy 50 similar products or 20 similar products or 3 similar products, whatever it may be. So yeah, you can differentiate on a product story, and many brands try to do that, but you also can differentiate or at least stand out through a community strategy. And at the Allure store, that's what we tried to focus on, meaning how do we set up a event space? Like if you strip away all the marketing jargon from what we were an event space. It was branded. It was under the Allure umbrella. It had all of the touch points and hallmarks one would expect from the Allure experience on other channels. So there was a continuity there, but it was an event space. And when you reach a certain momentum, like we did very, very early on, where brands are utilizing the room for events, it snowballs. And by the time that we finished the exercise in January of this year, we had hosted over 500 events, a real number, over 500 events. It came out to just under one event per day we were open. Now, of course, there were many.
Let me ask you a question, because this sounds ideal, but when a brand will come to you and say, so what's the return of investment here for the brand? Yeah. How would you respond to that question? Because I'm sure you had this conversation with, and this was a great opportunity, but again, it's not for every brand.
Yeah. So it's important to understand that this was a top of the funnel exercise. Okay. And brands had to approach it like they would any other top of the funnel exercise, meaning attribution models, direct point-to-point attribution models to say, if you do this on marketing X, you can see a return of A, Y, etc. in sales. This is very easy to do with performance marketing, as everybody knows. And brand marketers, right? If we look at marketing as two kind of what should be connected pillars, but often aren't, brand marketing and performance marketing. So performance marketing had a glorious heyday the last 10, 15, 20 years. You can even say we're still in it, where brilliant minds, statistical models, technological tools made performance marketers' jobs not only easier, but more defensible, because you can create these accurate attribution models and you can show stakeholders, executives, directors, etc. Here's what we're doing. And we sit in front of knobs all day. We crank them, we turn them up, we turn them down, control experiments, A/B exercises, blah, blah, blah. And you can fine tune. And you fine tune, of course, in perpetuity. You never stop fine tuning. But that was a way, especially in the D2C heyday. I think we're over the D2C heyday.
Let me stop for a second and say this is something that I'm so glad that you mentioned in perpetuity, because this is something when you start doing performance marketing, and in my humble opinion, performance marketing and branded marketing, they always need to be together. If
it should be
successful, but because you need to be always very cohesive. If you have a different experience in one place or another, the transaction won't work as well. But however, when you're talking about this performance marketing, this is something that you're doing continuously. In this case, this was one time.
These were discrete moments. That's exactly right. The reason I'm banging on about performance marketing is because this is not to disparage performance marketing at all, but we were not performance marketing at all. We even had on our materials, and we talked about this with prospective brands, it's brand marketing. It's top of the funnel. If you aren't doing top of the funnel this quarter, this year, this cycle, this budget, then this is not the exercise for you. If you are investing in brand marketing, which of course, when we say top of funnel, we're talking about awareness.
I always tell my clients is new blood. You always need to do top of the funnel, because you always want to create brand awareness and bring in new blood, new clients. Otherwise, you're always going to try to sell the products to the same people.
That's right. And which of course is like what a lot of brands, especially if you're working on limited budgets and you have limited expectation thresholds, meaning if you're an employee, like if you're C-level executive, you still are working to defend where your spend goes, where your efforts are quarter after quarter. And sometimes that doesn't lend itself to long tail projects. When I say long tail, I just mean a year or 2 years. So we had to tell brands that the return on investment is, first and foremost, it's not going to be tied to sales tomorrow or next week. So we want people to dispel themselves of that notion. But the return rather is on building experiences and moments that grow your community. Now, the value.
And this needs to be part of your whole strategy, on your brand strategy.
Should be. It's not all the time, because brand marketers, I think, were a bit thrown to the wilderness. Again, over the D2C golden era, where performance marketing drove high enough returns and your advertising ROAS was really attractive, there wasn't a compelling reason to spend a ton of money on brand marketing if you can make a ton of money off of performance.
That's the same thing about having a beauty brand or any kind of brand. You either create a brand and you create products that it will last, or you create a collection of just things that you sell.
Yeah,
and that makes a difference. I mean, I believe that yes, in performance marketing, if you put a lot of money, you're gonna sell if you do it well. But how long are you gonna last? Are you creating a brand awareness?
And what happens when you turn that spigot off?
Yeah.
What happens when you turn that hose off?
You have no loyalty.
That's right. And it becomes a declining return. And that was also part of our story, from a business perspective. When we reached our partnership deal with Condé Nast, part of the story we were telling, and it was a real story, we played off it, was the obvious one, COVID. So what's going to happen at the exit of COVID? Well, there's going to be pent-up demand for live events. There's going to be pent-up demand for community, human-to-human interaction. I mean, anybody could see that. But another part of the story, maybe more important than the post-COVID spike in a desire for people to do human IRL stuff, brands to do IRL moments, was that the D2C playbook, where you could pump money into online channels and marketplaces, aka performance marketing, broadly speaking, that was declining very rapidly through, everyone knows, through iOS 14 and cookies and
the new.
So brands had to adjust. So if you're a CMO and your marketing budget remains constant, we'll say for argument's sake, but you're getting less and less return, in some cases much significantly less return or even negative return of certain performance marketing activities, you do have money that frees open in your budget to do other things, and it allows people the creativity, brand marketers, to get back into the conversation and say, okay, well, you're not getting 3 or 4 or 7x ROAS anymore. Heck, you might not even be getting 1x ROAS on certain channels. So why don't we take this opportunity and invest in other things? And community and IRL moments, and also partnerships is a big part of the story as well, I'll add. That's why the Allure store, one of the first things that brands discovered, this wasn't even us. Yeah. This was brands within the first 2-3 weeks of opening. Brands were like, oh, can I do an event with them, with him, with her, with this? So it became a bit of a sandbox, which was intentional. Like any brand can invest 10 or 20 or 50 or $100,000 and do their own ice cream truck or do their own moment at the Grove or in Union Square, at wherever. But we created, almost inadvertently, an environment where brands got into the sandbox, and our program was quarterly. And at the beginning of the quarter, in fact, a few weeks before the quarter would commence, we would say, hey guys, welcome to Q3 cohort. Here are the other 70, 80, 90, 100 brands in the room with you. We would open a Slack channel and say, have dialogue, communicate, exchange ideas. And so brands would look through that list and say, you know what? I'm in the club with so-and-so. Wouldn't it be cool if we pooled resources and audiences? This is not a new story. Collaboration, brands do it all the time. But instead of collaborating on the product front, which is the usual thing that brands do, collaborate on the experiential front and co-host an event or try host an event, right? We had events in the store that sometimes had as many as 5 or 6 brands who all felt an affinity for one another, who all saw cross-pollination opportunities, and each of them would throw in a otherwise very low dollar investment and say, wow, I can get an event that looks like $100,000 event by merely putting in $5K because I have 6 other brands that are all pulling their weight as well.
David, let me ask you a question, because I see this as a very successful experience if it's done well. But what happened, because I know, as a matter of fact, that brands that they are smaller and they make a huge investment, believing that they pull this budget and say, I want to be the unique brand doing this, thinking that this experience will change their life. Yeah.
So I think if the question you're getting at is why do brands exit? And why is the model why are we not still open the store? And although it was designed to be a perma pop-up, I think the answer to that is, and we heard this a lot on our exit surveys, our exit interviews, is that brands came to the Allure store to achieve an objective around a certain campaign, or in some instances, 2 or 3 campaigns. For example, maybe a brand is doing something in New York at some other location. Maybe the founder's talking on a panel. Maybe there's a product launch at a Target. Maybe you're doing a subway or a digital campaign or geo-targeting or bus shelters, whatever. But brands would look at their calendars 12 months out and say, hey, when are we in New York? We as humans, as team members, and also when is the brand? When do we have moments that are sparking in New York? And they would tie it in with the Allure store. So they'd say, bolt it on. Or the corollary, they would join the Allure store and they say, hey, if we're going to be here for 6 months and we're going to commit resources to this, let's leverage it and set off a few other fireworks in New York City. Okay? At the end of that quarter or 2 quarters or 3 quarters, so we were a quarterly program. Some brands would book a year full, which is 4 quarters. Some brands would book 1 quarter. But they would come in, achieve what they want to achieve, which is a specific marketing campaign or moment.
But again, you're talking about something that it was strategized. What happened to those brands who said, hey, can I just host an event? Because I've seen that happen in too. And
brands did that. Many brands did that. But we, of course, if you mean, hey, we just want to host an event and leave, that's something that didn't fit within our model. We would say, okay, book a quarter. You can host 0 events. You can host 5 events. We put a very flexible cap. You almost couldn't even call it a cap. It was only a cap in so much as we're open, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. But brands that came there, and this was many brands, said, look, I'm coming here for 6 months. All that matters to me are the 4 hours of my 2 events. So I'm going to do one event on a Thursday afternoon. I'm going to do another event on a Sunday morning, whatever it may be. And brand, that's where their return was analyzed. They didn't so much concern themselves with the other 178 days of the exercise. They're happy to be on a shelf. They're happy to be present while 150, 250, 350 other events are occurring. But for them, it was a pay-to-play model that was worth it because they got use of a venue that was recognized by the beauty community. I'm talking fans. And of course, was closely linked. It was under the Allure umbrella. And they said, you know what? If I were to do an IRL moment in New York, for example, in Nolita at a blank white space that I'd have to rent, what would be the cost-benefit analysis? How much does it cost me to do a product launch with blowouts and makeup sessions and sidewalk manis, whatever it may be? What does it cost for me to do that as a singular brand versus me doing it in the Allure store that already has all of these, not only event DNA built within the walls from all of the brands that preceded you in that room, but of course had the hard resources, production, film, video teams, etc., staffing, already part of the package. So it became a question, I think, for a lot of marketers of convenience. Are we doing something in New York? Like a lot of marketers, I think, would very quickly reach a conclusion when they join the Allure store. Are we going to be in New York City over the next 12 months in some way, shape, or fashion? Yes, we are. We're going to be maybe at, I don't know, a trade show. Okay, how do we tie in a moment at the Allure store there? Is it worth us adding this incrementally to our budget? Yes, it is. And other brands would look at it, the smaller brands, I think, the medium-sized brands, would say, whoa, I can actually build a New York campaign around this, around it. You look at a brand, just throw one out there like Vacation. I know that they had a ton of marketing dollars they were spending when they launched the sunscreen brand, of course, that's now, it has seen tremendous growth. But they booked the Allure store, and afterwards, meaning after they booked it, but of course, before it goes live, they start planning all these other things around New York, and the events keep pinging back to the Allure store or around it within a certain radius, 5-mile radius, 10-mile radius, whatever. So they have the trucks going, etc. So brands could either use it as a hub for marketing activities, they use the kind of wheel metaphor, or they could use it as a spoke, which a lot of brands, they'll use in a brand that did it as a minor spoke. Carol's Daughter, right? They had a monster 6-figure campaign running in Times Square, and had all these moments around New York, 3, 4, 5 moments with the founder around New York City. And they said, why don't we just tack on as a spoke to our existing tent pole, which is this big campaign launching in Times Square, and we'll do something at the Allure store as well. So it functioned either as a hub of activity where you could build things on, or as a spoke off plans, campaigns that were already mapped out.
David, obviously this thought and this store was brilliant, but what happened? Why it closed? And what are the opportunities now? And we didn't get to talk about your background, that it comes from the pop-up world.
Yeah.
And so now what can brands do, and what are the opportunities? Because I see smaller brands opting in for trade shows. Is trade shows the right way for them to go? Because for very new brands, that to put that amount of money in a trade show is the right thing to do. It's the right thing to go smaller pop-ups. You are the expert in that too. So tell us, what do you think?
Well, let's address the first question first, which is why, even though the concept was hardwired to end, and frankly, that's because it was not a retail exercise. So if you're not making profits, if you're not a retail operator, then there's no reason to believe you can run a 10-year marketing campaign with the same objectives and on the same dirt. Talking about the plot, 191 Lafayette Street. And so it wasn't hardwired to last forever, but I think the reason that we concluded it when we did is because the majority of the brands that came into the Allure store, maybe it's 60% or so, would come in, achieve what they want to achieve, leave. I would do an exit survey, interview, phone call, Zoom with them, And they'd say, look, David, we're happy with our investment here. We did what we wanted to do here. We had our moment. We captured our content. We brought in our partners. We found new partners that we didn't expect to have. We got good media legs from it. Some of it evergreen, most of it not. But still, we achieved what we came here. Goodbye. Thank you. We will come back to you when we're doing something next that could utilize this tool in New York. In other words, it became, or it was for CMOs, not a question of, at least the way our offering was laid out. It wasn't something that made sense quarter after quarter after quarter.
Like we were talking before, it's before we started podcast about the timing of a brand.
They come in, they do what they want to do. And this was almost like, we talked about this a lot internally and with all of our kind of partners at Condé, was this satisfaction that we knew brands, the great majority of brands, left satisfied and confident that their investment was well spent, particularly because our price points were not aggressive, but you didn't get them to come back. Excuse me, let me change that. Not that you couldn't get them to come back, you couldn't get them to, as a recurring partner, stay quarter after quarter after quarter. So we saw a lot of brands that would come in for a quarter, bye, then they'd come back 2 quarters later, or they'd come back 3 quarters later. So they would take this pause. So kind of written into the model is that you come in, you do what you need to do, and you use the tool again down the road if and when you need it. But it's not the model where you must continually keep.
It's not that performance marketing that you need to continue and continue.
Yeah, because look, how many, this is a silly metaphor, but imagine you take, we both have youngish kids. Imagine you take your kids to Six Flags or whatever, Universal Studios, Disney, and you understand it's going to be $1,000 day or $600 day or whatever. You go in, you have a great time, you spend what is probably a lot of money for one day, and you leave really satisfied, even though maybe certain things are overpriced or whatever. You don't go back to Six Flags next week. You don't go back to Disney a month later. You wait. You might go once a year. So it's not something that you necessarily feel Six Flags or Disney has let you
unless you have the pass, but you do it in increments. You don't go and do everything all day.
Right. And what we had at our conclusion, our product offering, so to speak, meaning the Allure Store's offering to brands, was the facility, the eventing opportunities, the community building opportunities that were very consolidated. I mean, you could never find a forum to talk to 90 brands in a sandbox all at once unless you had an army of PR people reaching out for you doing it. And then, of course, the editorial alignment, the alignment with a respected outlet like Allure. So that was the value prop. But really,
that was a value prop. But what now for the brands? What's available for them now?
Well, since the concept we closed down in January, what we wanted to offer, and indeed we're going to offer as the next version, the next evolution of the Allure Store, was going to be the event narrative writ large. In other words, orders of magnitude larger. So while everyone, 500 plus events, 360 plus brands in total over 18 months, took advantage of this awesome corner real estate we had on Lafayette and Broome, 2,200 square feet, that has its natural limitations. Even if you have queues down the block to Canal Street, which we had all the time, there's still natural limitations on how many people can fit in one room, and so how big of an experience you can do and how wide that reaches. So our next step was we were going to do a large format festival, like a proper festival, 10,000 plus people on the street. It was going to be on Lafayette Street, on the block. In fact, covering 2 blocks. So from Lafayette to Canal, from Broome to Canal. So 2 blocks.
Okay.
And that was going to be the idea that if brands loved the eventing opportunities and we saw them investing in these IRL experiences, that they would want to do the same. And our our insight, our hunch, notion, whatever, was correct, because we went back to brands and said, hey, we're thinking about doing a huge festival, which of course has been done by BeautyCon. It's an entirely different conversation. But when you look at large format beauty consumer ticketed experiences where consumers can come in, they can try products, they can buy products, they can sample products, they can win stuff, they can get services administered, there's contests, they can meet people they want to meet. That means vloggers, that means influencers, that means founders, that means makeup artists, hairstylists, etc. They can learn, they can attend panels, all of these things, so that you would expect at a BeautyCon or a Pop Sugar Playground or at 29 Rooms, even though that's not specific to beauty. So that's what we were going to do, and it was going to be specific to beauty. And that's actually the idea that you could say survives, or that is the successor concept to the Allure store, because that's what we are building now to bring to Los Angeles next spring, summer.
Amazing. So how can we learn more about this?
In the coming weeks, months, we're going to be sharing with a lot of our former brand partners. That means media, that means retailers, and that means most importantly brands, what this festival is going to look like.
Well, this is super exciting for the beauty community, and to have a new space to be able to share. And I hope, David, that when you have that information, you share it with us so we can share it with everyone.
We would love to. We would love to.
So, David, before we go on, because I know that we already took a lot of your time and your wisdom, but for brands that they're starting out there, we talk about creating cohesive strategies, about the pillar of branding and performance, that they need to be together. I personally love the collaborations with brands and stores and all kind of collaboration. But what's your recommendation for a brand that's starting and they have limited budget? Because I see that we can get lost. There's so much out there.
Yeah. Well, there's a ton of noise in beauty, and we all know why there's a ton of noise, because the market is saturated with products of all kind, and most people in the industry know why that is because it's an industry that has tremendous margins. So it attracts a lot of people, and it also is an industry that relies inordinately, at least relative to other industries, on marketing, right? I mean, let's face it, it is beauty. You are selling beauty. Yeah. Okay, there's also something to be said about functional products. There ought to be, there always is, and there's more each day than there was previously in terms of you selling image or you selling an actual result. Thankfully, we're moving more towards the latter, selling actual results. But still, to cut through the noise, I think if this was young brands or indie brands that are not working with huge budgets, that are not backed by startup capital or investment rounds, etc. I really think it's about building community and brand marketing first. I really do. I mean, I'm going to make an obvious, it's insight. It's of course not unique to me, but integrated marketing as a discipline is something that a lot of marketers and brand builders and founders find challenging.
Yes.
How do we take
that's what I come in as an agency with, because we can offer that. And that's what I saw so many small brands failing because they weren't able to integrate their marketing.
That's right. Or they kind of pick marketing exercises, which is fine, it's by necessity. You pick marketing channels and marketing strategies and you kind of run them and think about them a la carte. Okay. And one struggles because unless you deliberately find a way to connect these nodes, you end up splashing marketing dollars and energy and time and brains on these lightning rods that are all supposed to drive to the bottom of the funnel, but they come in from different points. Integrated marketing does the opposite. It thinks of things and how you're supposed to connect these nodes from the beginning. So someone at the bottom of the funnel, although, yes, they inevitably came in through one specific input, ideally, they've seen and been exposed to other touch points that have gradually pushed them down a funnel, and it becomes irrelevant.
I love, David, how I align we are. And And I can keep talking to you forever about this.
Yeah. I want to just one note because I omitted it. Your question, your thoughts on trade shows. There are so many trade shows out there. It's funny running through the list. Beauty Matter publishes a wonderful list of all of them annually. But they're hundreds. I mean, literally hundreds.
Yeah,
if you count
you
globally.
have to pick and choose, and it costs a lot of money. And if you can't travel in food,
that's right. And what we see, even when I saw you, recently in Vegas at Cosmoprof, I think that the plethora of trade shows and the declining retailer interest in either A, outright attending, or B, sending actual decision makers who go with an intent or desire to pick up and learn about and sign new brands. I mean, write purchase orders. Ultimately, you want to go to a trade show, you want to exchange a conversation, have a meeting, a business card, dinner, whatever. You want to meet retailers and hope within 30 days after, or whatever it may be, you get a purchase order. If that's not happening like it used to, and it's not, anyone will tell you that it's not.
I mean, I talked to brands after we met in Las Vegas, and I talked to brands, and it's been a while. They had talks, but nothing really happened.
Right. And I think that that's why you see the trade shows, both in the industry landscape, consolidating. You see different trade show organizers globally that are buying up. There's a lot of M&A activity in other trade shows because they're trying to find efficiencies and ways to emphasize what works about trade shows or redefine the value prop, because the days of 10, 20 years ago, Premiere or Cosmoprof, the makeup show, whatever, and saying, look, come here, spend 10,000, 20K, 30K, all in, because you're right, it's flights, it's hotels, it's etc. And you're going to meet buyers that otherwise you wouldn't be able to meet. Well, that still needs to lead to something. And if brands aren't getting that, I do think that brands are evaluating the wisdom of going to a trade show. Not to say it's a total waste and Cosmoprof is going away. It's not. I love Cosmoprof. But I think brands that don't operate on huge budgets are looking out there and saying, if I'm going to do a trade show once a year or twice a year, what are the alternatives for me to do something else that could capture the attention of the B2B community, talking about buyers and media, but also get me in front of my consumer marketing goals? And as I'll leave this as a final teaser to the concept that we're bringing to LA next summer and then to other markets in subsequent years, we're trying to marry those two things.
Which is brilliant.
We're trying to get an exercise where chief commercial officers and chief marketing officers can say, yes, this is an exercise worth defending from a sales and biz dev perspective, a la Cosmoprof. And the CMOs can say, alternatively, with their teams, this is something we would invest in for a consumer marketing / experiential moment. And then it becomes a matter of, for brands and decisions for executives and founders, et cetera, of efficiency. I mean, imagine if you could go, you have so many brands that you work with, Lara. Imagine if you could suggest, hey, I think you should do Cosmoprof in Vegas or upcoming Miami, January, or Bologna, wherever. I think you should do this trade show. Want to know why? Because the day after the trade show ends, it's just a silly example, and it's not true. But imagine if Cosmoprof Miami started or ended immediately before or after Art Basel, Miami Art Week.
Yes.
And you see lots of brands down there. I know that there's lots of huge consumer brands and luxury brands and so forth. But imagine if you had a major cultural moment on the calendar, like a Art Week Miami, and it was immediately before or after a large format, value-driven.
Yeah, it's too much. It's a lot.
Well, that's what we're trying to do. So brands don't have to segment it and say, okay, we need to send our sales team to Dubai. There's a big trade show, but we also need to send them to Coachella to do this little thing, or South by to do this. Yeah. So we're trying to merge it together, even though, of course, it's different audiences. And you have a summit, an industry summit day that does not allow entry to your consumers for X dollars. And then you have another day. But the point is you build them under the same roof, under the same calendar moment. So the marketing budgets and the sales biz dev budgets can ultimately be synchronized.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you so much for sharing all that. And I wish we had more time to keep talking, but you'll come back and we'll talk more.
I'll be happy to. Okay.
And to you guys, thank you for being here. And I will see you next week with more Coffee Number 5.
Big thank you to Lara and all the audience. And Lara, I know that we'll be chatting soon. Congrats with the podcast. Congrats with your, the consulting and agency business you've got. And also, it's an amazing new product. I don't know if you've shared that yet with your audience, so I'll keep it a bit under wraps.
Thank you, David. Thank you. I got the fan
Find
ready.
everything you need at laraschmoisman.com or in the episode notes right below. Don't forget to subscribe.
It was so good to have you here today. See you next time. Catch you on the flip side. Ciao, ciao. What I love about the beauty industries is that there is always room to grow. I love to learn more about innovation, possibilities of investment, and partnerships across the industries. If you want to learn more, join me at Beauty Connect this November 6 to 8 in Los Angeles.